Civilized Society.
Welcome to Peasant Radio. We are bringing a special episode to you. This is an emergency release. We're responding to Trump's speech, of course, because that's the big thing going on. That's the news, and we got to talk about it. But what I want to talk about, I want to actually critique Trump's speech from my background as an art critic. Trump's speech in general is worthy of analysis because of his particular form of articulation. Such famous phrases as.
Do you know what's worthy of analysis?
Stop it! Stop! You're already ruining.
What is
the
also
podcast.
worthy of analysis?
You always ruin my introduction.
introduce your co-host. All right. When you talk about we, when you say we, and then you just go on a 5-minute diatribe without introducing your co-host, and it sounds like you're possessed by spirits. The people don't know.
That's the effect that I want.
Continue.
It's over. You demolished the momentum. Let's talk about Trump's speech. Listen, I didn't finish it all because it sucks. It's kind of boring. This is the problem. Where's the fire? Where's the energy? Okay, where's all the things that we have come to love, to hate from Trump? He gave us, what do you call the gruel you give prisoners? Like bland?
Gruel. Prison gruel.
I feel like he gave us an oatmeal speech. Like, come on now. There was one part that stuck with me that I laughed out loud at. And he said, he was like, lowest levels of terrorism, including Islamic terrorism. Why did he say it like that? I don't know, but it was with great comedic effect for me. This is one of Trump's strengths, is his strange form of articulation. Yeah, he says things like, he did his classic billions and billions. There's something really satisfying about the way he says things. The things he says, not so much, but
I think it's when he is paying attention to the teleprompter. You can tell, and I actually did watch the end of the speech, so you can tell that at the end of the speech, there's this, someone wrote it, and he's going on this thing where he's like, make America, and he's doing all these hieroglyphs in the air with his fingers for whatever reasons. Is like, make America super again, make America surprising again, all these things, to end on the crescendo of make America great again. And you can tell he's reading, but then he'll do these asides. And I think that the speech lacked the asides that people enjoy, for better or for worse, from the performer, former President Donald Trump.
The performance artist known as Donald Trump. Listen, the thing is, we want to do a little bit of an art criticism here, right? So let's look at the strengths of Trump's speech. I'll tell you, the strengths are when he does this kind of like off-the-cuff commentary, it's like he speaks with footnotes, is what you're kind of talking about, to these little asides. He'll say something very kind of grand, and so grand and vague as to be meaningless. Like, this is the best country in the world. But then that's kind of just like, no one cares. That's like, it doesn't mean anything because it's so grand and you can't prove that. But then he says, as an aside to that, it's very simple. And that makes it perfect. When you say, this is the best country in the world, it's very simple. That's the art. That's what we know Donald Trump for. So I live for those little comments that he throws in that just make otherwise like really boring general statements like America is number one or whatever. Very unique to him. It's very simple.
So one of the problems I see here coming up is what I have decided to term double nostalgia. These are my notes that I wrote down. Double nostalgia. So in 2016, you had him basically invoking a kind of past, make America great again. In other words, it was great at some point. A little bit unclear exactly. I'm not sure if he actually defined the point when it was, but maybe it was the 80s for him. I think probably for him it was the 80s as a human being, you know? And now there's a problem because he said, it's funny, I'm starting to do things with my hands now too. He said, first off, he characterized Joe Biden's presidency as the pause. I don't know if you noticed that. There are some very small, there are very small things in there that I actually pay attention to. It was weird. So he characterized the current president's term as the pause between obviously his reign or whatever in 2016 to 2020. But now he has this problem because the whole speech was actually about how things are really great in 2019 when he was president. You know, the whole speech is like, we had the best economy, everybody, all the people, regardless of their background, whatever, were becoming rich, all this stuff, right? So now it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because that is actually, to me, more appealing than the original idea of Make America Great Again or whatever. Because I do feel like there is a very big switch between the world we live in over the last two and a half years. And, you know, it's odd to me, but it feels like a different world somewhat. And this one doesn't feel great.
You don't like Joe Biden's America?
It's actually not so much about that. It's that I think that something fundamentally changed when the COVID lockdowns hit. And I think that we live in a different world now. And so to appeal to that is going to be weird. There's going to be some rhetorical issues with Make America Great Again. Like, well, which part? 2019 or 1950 or 19 whatever. But that could resonate a little bit, because I don't think anyone's had a lot of fun in the last couple of years.
Well, it always did resonate. That's the thing. It plays off of this vague idea of returning to some better past, which every human being on the planet can think of that. That it doesn't need to tie anything specifically together. It just needs to evoke your idea of a better past. And there's certain phrasings that do this in different ways too. I can't remember. One of them stood out to me where it was, oh yeah, he said something like, people are coming over the border and they're doing bad things. They're coming to do bad things. You know what they are. And that's it. And then he just moved on. And I was like, no, I don't. What do you mean? But see, that's not the point of that rhetorical device. What that does is let you choose. You get to fill in the blank with whatever your fear or your knowledge or whatever it may be is for that phrase. And there's something very these were why these speeches generally bother me, because they are art, essentially. They're not informative. No, he's not getting up there and discussing the details of policies that he wants to enact. They're just an emotional event. And so you rate these things on how they do that, whether they do that, as opposed to being like, what do you mean we're the greatest country in the history of the earth? Prove it. Of course that can't be proven. It's a rhetorical device. And it's almost so flamboyant and extravagant that it seems silly to even say something like that. But then he
it's
throws
not, though,
in
because
something.
We live in a democracy, and of course he's talking to the masses. That's who he's talking to. And the masses don't want policy proposals. They want what it is, exactly what you're saying, these kind of vague things. Now then, the people that are, you know, reporters or the media or content creators, whatever, they'll go through and they'll pick at these things and say, yeah, well, what did he mean? You know, there'll be a scene in an article like, what did he mean about, it was a dog whistle or whatever, to say, you know what they'll do or whatever, right? And, you know, you can make a case for all the different ways to take a speech like this apart. But the thing is, the disconcerting thing, but these speeches aren't meant for thinking. they're meant for feeling something,
Yeah.
to motivate you to go do a thing. Briefly, before we leave this point,
though, I didn't feel very motivated. It just felt like it was kind of, you know what? I think that he doesn't actually want to win. I think that he doesn't really care about winning or even generally believe that he will win. I think he just wants to run because he likes the attention. I think that it's that.
that's possible. I'd like to, but so one more thing about nostalgia, though, because it's something that occurred to me when we were talking about it, is that you can, you know what? When you're trying to convince people of something, I just realized appealing to nostalgia is probably always the safest and most effective bet. If you assume that out of X amount of people you're talking to, a smaller percentage of those people had a better life in the future planned out than they do in the past. So in other words, almost everybody, unfortunately, probably falls prey to nostalgia because the way time works. Like everyone's life, you can always
Everything
look
gets
back on your
shittier.
life. Harder, more difficult, less obvious what's going to happen, and shittier to a degree, yeah, just because people get older. And so there's always kind of a way to appeal to the past as a better thing. And so it's funny because that has to almost always be the smart move when you're trying to convince people of something.
Well,
Just
no.
mathematically.
No, because there's two ways, right? Which is, yes, you can appeal to nostalgia and say, remember how good you used to have it? Remember how happy you used to be? Because first of all, this is nostalgia is by definition inaccurate. So you always look back on the past and think, oh, there was something better there. If you're looking in a nostalgic way, because you're leaving out certain details, all this. But there's also the appeal to the future. So this idea that what do you mean? This is exactly what Obama did. It was hope, forward. There's another element to this. There's these two ways to go about this, which is appeal to the past, appeal to the future. Because if you don't have any hope for the future, you kill yourself, essentially. The only thing that keeps people alive is that they think tomorrow may be better. So if you validate that hope in them, if you say you're right to think that because it will be, you can harness that same power that you're identifying nostalgia as having, but it's the reverse.
You're wrong in so many interesting ways. Let me pick a couple. So, but this is detailed, so let me struggle to try to get this out. So when you appeal to a better past and you promise to bring it back to people, you're accomplishing the same thing as a hopeful vision for the future. You're just appealing to the past. And just like you said, and this was key, since people don't actually remember the past correctly, they pick out the things that they liked or whatever, then it's a big winning rhetorical move. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can speak to people, and if you assume that they will pick out the good things in the past over the bad things, on average, more often than not, and then you can say, I'm going to transfer that feeling to the future, then you've got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, but I think you can also do it solely based on a future lens.
You can't in this world. Okay, so
I think you could acknowledge that the past has actually been bad. Like, hey, haven't the last 4 years been shit? Hasn't everything been going down? Look forward, because what I'm going to bring you is better. So there's that element too.
I think that, just speaking for the current moment in America, and maybe in the Western world in general, I think there is less material wealth and less, like, there's very good reasons not to be hopeful for the future. Like, there's tangible reasons.
I'm not saying it's a good idea to use the future strategy right now.
I'm just talking about what's effective or not. Yeah. I'm not making a value judgment. I'm saying that, well, anyway, let's move on to the next critique.
Critique. That's how he would say it. There's something interesting about his articulation. It's very comedic. He has a comedic air about him. Some say he's our first comedian president. I am some. I think he is comedic. Now, do I want a comedian president necessarily? Perhaps not. But the speeches are interesting. So what else? What else did you notice?
I also noticed a disturbing trend, which I would like to state
Great.
that I'm against. And this will make all the centrists happy. I really don't like the thing I really disliked about this was his thing about we need to execute drug dealers.
Oh.
Now, so you didn't even really watch much of this, did you? I can tell you're like, oh, yeah. And you're like, well, you'd make to that part, I guess. Okay.
I got like halfway through.
Right.
So.
Okay. So there is a problem that I see.
Why do they say that? You cannot execute drug dealers.
Because I'll tell you, and I'll tell you
This is where
what.
the right fucks up. They love to do this type of shit. It's like, can you please settle down and focus on things that are like a little more important than executing people, for Christ's sake?
So his contention is, and I don't particularly think this is incorrect, he's probably inflated the number a little bit, that a couple 100,000 people have died from fentanyl overdoses in the country this year. I've heard more around 150, something like that. That's a significant amount of people dead. And back in my day, when I was on the kind of libertarian, like, legalize all drugs idea, which I still to some degree believe is the best idea. That was, I mean, the overdoses from hard drugs were pretty small, and they were always brought up into this big deal. But I think like back in the late 90s, something like that, it was more around like 5,000 or 6,000 people, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people.
Wow.
So if it's the case that this has occurred, a couple 100,000 people dead, that's significant. Regardless of that, the thing is this. So I'm really like anyone who adopts the idea that we should take policy prescriptions from the Chinese Communist Party is dead to me, whether you're on the left or the right. So what happened was the Western world during COVID basically just took the Chinese COVID lockdown strategy and implemented that kind of poorly and patchily and different in different places. But they took this idea. They're like, oh, well, China's doing it. Maybe that's a good idea. No, that's a bad idea. You did a bad thing.
Was
and
China
then the
right, first ones to do the lockdowns?
Hold on for a second.
Okay.
And then what the right will do sometimes is they'll be like, and he said this in a speech, it's like Singapore doesn't have any drug dealers because they killed them all, and China doesn't have any drug dealers because they killed. We should do that. No, don't do that. Stop looking at China as a model for the future. It is not. I'll quote Donald Trump. It's a shithole. That's what it is. Granted, some of the cities on the Eastern Coast are modern and nice, but no, I don't want. And people have been doing this forever. I don't know why they do this, and then like it. Well, I'll stop, but it enrages me. It enrages me that anyone looks at the Chinese Communist Party and is like, let's do that.
Well, it's because people are dumb. Okay, some people are not smart. Some people don't understand that things must be dealt with as a whole. You cannot isolate out something and look and say, hey, in this totalitarian government, there's no crime. Let's just do their strategy for dealing with crime. Okay, great. Now you have to take the rest of that, which is people who are wrongfully executed and, living in a totalitarian state. So this is just not an option. It's not something you can't pick and choose pieces of an authoritarian system unless you're willing to risk living in an authoritarian system. It's fools. It's a fool's perspective. I think what's really gross,
agree
though,
entirely.
Yeah, I think what's really
I
gross.
actually had that in my notes, and you just happened to. I didn't send you the notes, so you said exactly what I was going to say. which was that you can't just take one or two policies from the Communist Party of China and be like, we'll do this. It won't even work. That's my whole point. Exactly. Is that like, even if you wanted to do that, it doesn't work because you're trying to take this policy and put it in a rule of law country to some degree. And so anyway, fine. That's all I had to say about that. But total rage.
Listen, okay, relax the rage because we need to articulate ideas here. Just, the real problem is when you have someone like Trudeau being like, look, they're doing great with the environment, and actually genuinely praises their policies because of the outcomes. Yeah, of course the Chinese Communist Party is doing great with the environment. They could just, off their citizenship if it helps clean the air. So when you have that level of power, sure, it's really easy to get the outcomes you want, but you sacrifice freedom and human dignity to do so. I don't think anything essentially is important enough to sacrifice freedom and human dignity, because ultimately those things can beget the outcome you're looking for. It's just harder to do, and it's not as perfect. But again, if you think it's perfect to use these kind of authoritarian strategies, it's because you are not looking at the full picture. You're only looking at the ease of, this kind of one-party rule. I make a decree and I immediately get the outcome I want. It is a very, very flawed, restricted perspective. So that kind of, admiration for the outcomes that authoritarianism can gain is really dangerous. Much more so to me than something like Trump being like, we should execute the drug dealers. Because look, while that's still authoritarian, the problem is that that's the inherent authoritarian impulse in human beings. There is this primitive authoritarian impulse in people that immediately jumps to force as the answer for things. So crime, kill them. Drugs, kill them. Misinformation, censor them. This is the easy answer. It's the primitive approach to things that you don't like, is to immediately force it away. So there's a difference to me between like the articulated praise for an authoritarian system, like Trudeau has done towards the Chinese Communist Party, versus the kind of like layman being like, we should execute rapists, that kind of thing, which is a more immediate reaction, not really an articulated praise of authoritarianism.
So many things to say about that. First off, while I say these things, I'd like you to just get a number in your head about how many people you think Canada euthanized last year. Just take a guess. And then...
but this is progressive.
Secondly, I'd like to say, Trudeau, no one cares. No one cares what Canada does. It's a pointless country. Seriously, it doesn't have any sway on the global stage. It's useless. The thing they were useful for was some like kind of shitty oil, and then we stopped doing that. So whatever, they can do whatever they want. There's actually footage of Trudeau, like Chairman Xi just basically just bitch slapped him at this meeting in Bali recently, rhetorically, verbally. Anyway, so there's that. Now,
really
what
funny,
I will say,
either way,
is that. There is what you said, true, a response of like, just, get rid of them. But there is also, you can't just keep letting things go to hell and say, well, let's do the same thing. Now, bring this back to Trump's policy, though, in his speech. In theory, if he was going to take care of the border, which is where he says all the fentanyl's coming through the border and all this, right? In theory, then there wouldn't be a need to execute a bunch of drug dealers because he would fix the border, and so it wouldn't be coming through in the first place, so whatever. You can tell he does this, though, and politicians do this, actually. He does it in a very crude way. Politicians do it a different way. They'll float little ideas out there. They know that it's not going to happen. They know they're not going to do it, but they want to get a response and see where the mood is or whatever. He does it in his rallies off the cuff a lot, and other politicians in power do it a much more refined way, which is that, so one could say, an example of this would be the student loan forgiveness thing with Biden. He's like, throws out this idea right before the election. Hey, we're going to get rid of your $10,000 student loan. Someone's telling him, I don't think he knows, but someone's telling him, the courts aren't going to allow that. He knows that, but he's just throwing it out there and then letting it take care of itself. But anyway, 10,000 people in 2021 euthanized by the Canadian government. So they're doing their yeah, that's something I really didn't know about that was that widespread. And apparently, and I mean, this could be misinformation, so feel free, YouTube, to put the misinformation thing under a video. Have we got any of those yet? I really hope we get some soon.
No, we haven't. We need to try harder.
We do. So assisted suicide, 10,064 assisted deaths in 2021, up from 7,000 in 2020.
They're doing great.
And in 2016, it was only 1,000. And now they're going to expand the guidelines apparently soon to include people with dementia and mental illnesses. That's the really interesting one, where they say
you're depressed.
It's okay
Why
in your
don't you
life
just
if you
kill
have a
yourself? Yeah. Look,
so
man.
That's Trudeau's doing his best.
That's not for the scope of this episode. But never have I been happier to not live in Canada. You know, I remember all the people that were like, "Oh, if Trump gets elected, we're gonna go to Canada." Enjoy. Where are ya? Because I have a feeling they didn't
bring
leave.
your SSRI prescriptions with you just in case that ends up.
They better work. Because if not,
yeah, they better work. A couple other. Will you throw a few more random things out here? I mean, listen.
Can I just say I don't.
Sure.
I don't think I'm not happy about Trump running. I think he had his time. I think it was very much like this weird anomaly in American politics that did some things that were needed. There was this kind of like ego break that the United States suffered through having Trump take office, because it was just like, oh, this system, we can't even pretend that it's very functional at this point, because this kind of chaos really makes you face that the facade of people who are experts and know what they're doing and trustworthy and can get things done, and all that kind of stuff that we associate, that we project onto figures like Obama and whatever. Trump broke that because he had no interest in decorum or fitting into that mold, and took on this very populist in some ways, but also just antagonistic approach to the tradition of holding that office. But that's enough now. It's enough now. I don't think we need any more breaking. I really hope not. I think that at this point, he will not serve any purpose for American politics. I don't think he can even win, to be honest. I don't actually think he would win. I don't see that happening. I don't think people want that. Even the people that support him on the first time, people that I know that did, they're not interested in supporting him again. So,
well, I am not going to speak to that exactly, except to say that he does have a ability to surprise people.
yeah.
And when he came out in 2016, everyone said this guy will never even get past the primary, and he destroyed all of his enemies. And he did do that, and he's not entirely bad at that. And I don't agree with you. I don't think the thing is, we don't have enough time for me to tell you how bad I think this is. But
Oh God.
I don't think the one thing that I think that if the current political situation is what the adults in the room, that's what people would tell me. Oh, we need the adults in the room. I mean, I don't think that's what we have. And to give him his due about one thing, which I always bring up, is that there weren't any new wars during his presidency, which he mentioned. And so now we're like, a couple of days ago, we're on the brink of doing nuclear war because some missiles fell into Poland on a farm, which everybody with any brain at all should have known from the very beginning. Briefly, I have to say this. And actually, it has to do with this speech. Because this happened that day. His speech happened that day. And he also said, probably Russian missiles or whatever. So can I just, this is a PSA for everyone, okay? Can I please just give a PSA and I'm done? If Russia is going to do a first strike on a NATO country, This is straight from the Kremlin, because I get my disinformation straight from the Kremlin. Here's what I'm going to suggest. They're probably not going to attack a farm on the border of the Ukraine and kill 2 people with missiles. If they were going to start World War III, just letting you know, I'm pretty sure that if Russia decides to start World War III, what they're not going to do is a first strike on a farm in Poland. That's probably not the main target they're going to take out. Just so everyone can, maybe we can all agree on that, because I'd like to, So, but of course you had immediately the Ukrainian guy saying, well, you got to, I just, you know what, I can't. I don't think we can discuss politics on this podcast. I can't do it. I can't. No, we can't.
That is a delightful little gesture.
You should watch the last minute of the speech, because he got way out of hand. He started doing too much.
I have to see that. You tell me that I gesticulate too much, but I think he takes it to an art form.
He does a good job at that.
Yeah. Well, great foreign politics analysis on your part. I think that takes the IQ of a tomato to be able to discern that. But apparently most of the people in positions of power and influence to do the discerning have IQs below tomatoes. So we will be turning to you for foreign policy and war coverage in the future. Hope you survive.
Call me Donald Trump or Joe Biden, whoever wins the next election. I'll do some foreign policy advising for you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, this speech overall, I give it a what? Like a 3 out of 5 stars? 2.75 out of 5 stars?
2.75. It was lukewarm. Stay tuned, because
I want to see that shit. Hit the shit. Throw the nicknames. Do the nasty stuff that we love and hate.
That's the point. It's not 2016 anymore. It's very weird, because now he took this tack of like, we all need to come together, actually. Yeah. What it boiled down to is the last 2 years have sucked, which is true. And we all need to come together and get rich. And that'll be cool. That's kind of what the idea was.
Well,
it was actually very conciliatory in a lot of ways. He would say things like, the left wing people would tell me in private, you're doing a good job. It was weird. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah, it was weird. It was weird. It didn't have his usual, muckraken spirit. It seemed a little bit like he wanted to at some moments, but then at other times he reined himself in and hit those regular, well, let's work together talking points. So overall, I give it a 2.75 stars out of 5. Not memorable, did not affect much emotion in me, and not even egregious enough to scare the people that are easily scared of things like this. So what's going on? Step it up or step it out. Anyway, that's our art criticism of Donald Trump's speech. If you enjoyed this content, if you'd like more unhinged content in your life, subscribe, like, leave a comment with your rating for Donald Trump's speech. See you in the next episode.